The powerful door, which opened only once a year, was now destroyed. The collapse of the artifact vault barrier was by no means a simple incident. The barrier administrators and the school headmasters immediately investigated the inverted pentagram artifact used to break it, but they found no mana reaction. Now, Bikir wore Dikrabir, which had transformed into a pendant. The situation was resolved with the conclusion that, being a single-use artifact, it had lost all mana signature. Because of this, it was now nothing more than a necklace with a threatening shape. Outside the academy, it was evening. Leaving behind big and small commotions like these, the academy league came to an end. In the academy dorms, Bikir had just showered and was drying his hair with a towel. As sunlight streamed into his room through the window, Bikir began to stare silently at the floor, lost in thought. His attention fixed on a paper that was on the table. It was an announcement for the mock investment competition, hosted by the bourgeois family. The poster described the competition as a stepping stone to the grand stage of the financial world, which would be held in the place known as the spine of the economy. Eligibility was open to all academy students for a 1-week registration period, after which the poster would vanish. Bikir's eyes began to shine as he noticed this. He had thought the survival competition was the last one, but now he realized there were all sorts of contests, like this mock investment competition. While our boy was distracted, someone in the shower opened the door and began to show him the Dikrabir pendant. Our boy turned around and upon seeing it, his eyes widened in confusion. Piggy was also taking a shower. With a towel on his head, Piggy came out of the shower and with a curious smile asked if this was his necklace. Dikrabir's attention fixed on Piggy and it couldn't help but blush. Bikir reached out his hand to grab his necklace. Piggy explained that he seemed to have forgotten it when leaving the shower room, so Bikir thanked him. Piggy returned to the shower and Bikir continued drying his hair with the towel. With a furious look, Dikrabir thought that they put men and women in the same room based only on appearance. But it supposed not. Still, the scene had been an entertaining spectacle, and it laughed. Bikir grabbed the necklace and as his eyes shone with rage, he reminded Dikrabir that he had already warned it he would shatter it if it tried any funny business. Dikrabir's expression changed, making it feel afraid, stammering. It tried to excuse itself by saying it was just commenting on how nice the dorm facilities were and that it was simply looking around. Just then, Piggy came out of the shower, his eyes widening in confusion, as he thought Bikir was talking to him. Quickly, Bikir hid the necklace behind his back and changed the subject, asking him what the poster on the desk was. Piggy's attention fixed on the poster, explaining that the mock investment contest would be held soon. It was a contest where you had to scout out promising stocks or sectors in advance to invest in them. Piggy clenched his fist and his eyes began to shine with determination. With a smile, he revealed that the hosts were the famous bourgeois family. He added that if one won or placed well, there were many benefits. Letting out a sigh and showing a smile, Piggy admitted that his combat record was poor, so he had no choice but to excel in a competition like this to earn extra points and make up for his credits. Bikir listened in silence, his eyes filled with confusion. Then, he became serious and told Piggy that while his talent for combat was lacking, he definitely had excellent talent in other areas. With an embarrassed smile, Piggy began to scratch his head. Bikir, who was hiding the Dikrabir pendant behind his back, began to ponder and remembered that Piggy was especially good at gathering, analyzing, and managing information. An image of Cindy Wendy with her fists clenched and eyes shining with joy came to Bikir's mind. He thought that if she saw Piggy, she would probably make a fuss to recruit him on the spot. Meanwhile, the little spider tried to eat the pendant, causing a confused Dikrabir to demand that it back off and stop. The image of Sinclair came to Piggy's mind, clenching his fist tightly with a look full of determination. He swore that this time, without fail, he had to beat Sinclair. Bekir felt a little confused hearing this. With a confident smile, Piggy explained that he had always lost to her in the previous tournaments. She also had a knack for economics and investment. So this time, he really couldn't afford to lose. As they were talking, time was passing, and the clock struck 6 p.m. Noticing this, Piggy moved like a thunderclap. He exclaimed that he was late. As he had an appointment with the professor, so he put on his shirt and headed out of the room. First, Beker's eyes filled with confusion, not knowing what was happening. Piggy moved so fast that he sent all the papers on the table flying into the air. Beker's attention fixed on the little spider and the pendant. The spider was drooling and smiling, while a furious Dicrabeer demanded that Bekir get this beast off of it. A few hours later, night fell. The moon was shining high in the sky, and there was no one on the streets. It had rained, forming puddles of water, perfect for the moon's reflection. Not long after, a man in boots began to run through the silent streets, splashing through a puddle. The man's face was covered in sweat, and he was panting heavily. He was no ordinary man. He wore a hat and carried an axe as a weapon. Without wasting a single second, the man continued running without looking back. The man got clear of the area, rested his hands on his knees, and began to pant heavily to catch his breath. His face was drenched in sweat and his eyes were weary, and he couldn't help but feel furious. Thinking that if it weren't for the presence of the woman Ouroboros, he could at least devour the imperial capital. At that moment, someone shouted his name, Edward Bourbon Jr. Hearing this, his eyes widened in surprise and his face twisted in fear. Making him grit his teeth hard, someone with a clenched fist appeared from behind and began to walk toward him. Edward turned around and with a confused gaze, asked what he was doing here and when he had followed him to this place. It was none other than the Nightblood Hound. As our boy's eyes glowed with rage, he began to stare intently at Edward. Edward was in shock, as he hadn't sensed his approach in the slightest. He wondered if he was one of the agents sent by Ouroboros, or the bloodhound she had mentioned was on the hunt. With a piercing gaze, Bekir told him he didn't know what he was talking about, and called him by his clerical name, Sam Bourbon. Far from feeling fear, Edward's face contorted with rage, and he demanded to know why he was digging into his past. Bekir began to walk toward Edward, revealing his martial rank of intermediate graduate and his position as a high priest of the upstart northern cult, the Arm Church. Our boy began to reveal everything he knew about Edward. He mentioned that, 25 years ago, he had abused and murdered his cousin, offering her as a sacrifice to forge his first pact with a demon. Since then, he had continued his religious activities while ruining thousands of families. Edward listened in silence and raised his axe, which began to gleam under as Beker's eyes glowed. He added that in his later years, Edward joined the demon army and opposed Quo Vadis. He couldn't help but feel furious. Bekir continued, stating that he had used his extensive knowledge of the scriptures as a weapon to infiltrate the temple as a spy. During the Holy War, he raised a rebellion behind the Human Alliance's back and dealt fatal blows to important heroes like Tudor La Mancha, Don Quixote and Bianca Foccia. Then asked if he was Edward began to stick out his tongue and, with a smile, admitted that he was correct, confirming that the parts about being a priest and his cousin were accurate. Swinging his axe forcefully, Edward lunged at Bekir and, with a furious expression, yelled that he didn't know what kind of nonsense he was spouting about the rest. As Edward closed in, Bekir remained calm, but in the blink of an eye, our boy unsheathed his sword, moved like thunder and severed Edward's head with a single, precise cut. To Bekir, even setting aside what hadn't happened yet, he was still trash. Edward's lifeless body fell to the ground, and our boy began to gaze down at the floor in silence. A strange scent began to emerge from Edward's corpse. Bekir turned around and, noticing this, felt somewhat confused as he perceived a magical smell. Bekir approached the corpse and, following the trail of the magical scent, noticed something in its pocket. Bekir pulled out a sheet of indulgence. On it, it read that all the sins of this faithful believer were forgiven. And it specified that the indulgence had been issued and guaranteed by the Church of the Old Testament, warning that its forgery would result in punishment. A magical scent began to emerge from the sheet. Bekir grew curious and began to read it carefully. He knew that after eliminating the demon ninth corpse, Dantalion, from the Quavadis family, the sale of indulgences should have been suspended, and yet, the demonic scent had not disappeared. In a serious tone, Dikrabir mentioned that it could feel it. It was spreading forcefully and growing more and more intense. It claimed that this scent was, definitely, that of the sixth corpse, who had been a close friend of the ninth corpse. Bekir began to ponder, realizing that he would have to thoroughly investigate the Quavadis family again. Beker's eyes began to shine with sadness, his gaze fixed on Edward's co-RPSE. What this guy had said earlier, the mention of Ouroboros, bothered him. Edward's head lay next to the corpse, surrounded by a pool of blood. Bekir reflected on the fact that she had been hunting the criminals of the imperial capital and wishing to meet him. The night hound, he had thought she was just a psychopath. But now it seemed she was a psychopath with a plan. It was night, and several hours later, someone in high heels appeared on the roof of one of the buildings. As the moon shone high in the sky, Ouroboros unsheathed her whip. She arrived at the place where Bekir had killed Edward and descended to the ground. She began to walk toward the corpse. Realizing that the night bloodhound was already gone, she crouched down and extended her hand to grab the head. She picked up Edward's head, wondering when Bekir would show her his noble appearance again. She began to stare intently at Edward's head, and as her eyes shone with excitement, she stuck out her tongue and couldn't help but wonder if she should hold out a little longer. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,